All right. Shall we go ahead and jump in here? I think we might have some other folks jumping in, as we start moving. So I will go ahead and just say hey to everybody on our call here. It's good to see everybody. I'm Kyle Salazar with the HUB team, and we are here with Keno Sadler, a former deep dive grantee, and who's done amazing things during and since that time. So we're going to spend a little time in conversation today. This is the second of our new Grantee Spotlight series, which is a little bit different than some of the things we've done before. The goal is really to look at former deep dive participants um, through their hub work and where they've gone since that time and how they translated equity commitments into real world practice. Organizations, leadership, everything kind of in between. The goal is to be interactive, have an open session. Keno is one of the most inspirational leaders that I've gotten to spend a lot of time with over the years. So it's just good to have his thoughts and energy in the space. So I hope everybody brought some questions as we go through this. We're going to ask you all to feel free to throw questions out in the chat or on audio, whatever works best for you. And hopefully we'll walk away with some practical ideas for operationalizing equity in our day-to-day environments. The Hub partners with RWJF, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, to support the Healthy Children and Families portfolio. We work with grantees to strengthen equity-centered approaches and alignment across the field. So I have a prompt here for our fun folks in the room. What is one word that comes to mind when you hear the phrase equity in action? So you can use the chat or you can jump out and say what you're thinking.
And since we have a small group, can we also just have people introduce themselves and like where they're calling
Yeah,
from or their organization?
absolutely. I think that makes good sense. I can kick it off. I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., where I speak to most of you regularly from. So it's good to see everybody. I will punt it to Araceli. How you doing?
Hi everyone. I've been sick and just got my voice back, so if I sound a little bit sexy voice, it's because I've been sick. I'm coming to you from California, Araceli Lopez Andrade with Lyft LA Regional Office. And are we answering the question as well or
Absolutely.
um you know, I I didn't want to start off negative. Because I that's not where I want to be. But when I think about equity in action right now, I just feel the word that came to mind was compromised. Given everything that's going on in the world, given the leaders that are making decisions for us, it just feels like every day that I wake up, I get punched in the face and then have to battle just so that I can protect equity and that I can use words like equity in action. So I just feel like it's compromised every single day. Not so much at Lyft. I will say that we keep pushing, hard, but definitely in the world, in my community, I just feel like it's been compromised. It's not something that it's safe to say as much. I know that's probably long-winded, but
No, I think that's pretty honest. I imagine a lot of folks are feeling that way today and in this time in particular. Thanks for sharing.
yeah. I'll pass it over to Tiffany.
Tiffany Williams Brooks. I am in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. When I think of equity in action, I think of movement. Typically, as we're, making, as you mentioned, RSLE, that push, there's still some movement that can happen even when we're pushing against obstacles. So I think of the word movement.
Think Militia maybe next.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Keno, it's good to see you again. I haven't seen you in a long time. Militia Witt Glover. I am calling in from just outside Raleigh, North Carolina. And when I think about what was the question when you think about equity in action? What was the question?
Yeah. What phrase comes to mind when you think about that?
So I do wear a number of different hats, one of which is leading a national nonprofit, the Council on Black Health. And so as we've been thinking about this work, what comes to mind right now for me is possibilities, because certainly things are we're under attack and compromised, but we also right now have the opportunity to collectively work together to build something new and different that works even better than what has been. And so I am somewhat RSLE. I sometimes wake up in the morning and I feel like I'm getting knocked down, but then I also think, well, maybe this is an opportunity like you're on the beach and somebody kicks over your sandcastle. Maybe this is an opportunity to build something newer, bigger, and better than the thing you had before. I don't know, but that's today I'm positive. If this were yesterday or tomorrow, I might have been less positive, but for today, I'm thinking possibilities to do something new. And Suri, I think I you might be the next person.
Yeah. Thank you, Militia. So Sri Clark calling in from Houston, Texas. And when I think about equity in action, I have two schools of thought. One is particularly around advocacy. Um, and I think to name some names, like I'm thinking about like Gavin Newsom, right? And like how he's just like kicking ass and being amazing, like despite everything that's happening in the backdrop, right? So that's one school of thought. And then I think the other one is like just valuing lived experience. When I think about equity in action, it is that simple. Like just the value of lived experience, bringing that into your programmatic work, leadership at all levels. That's the most succinct way I can say that.
That's great. All right. Well, I'm going to give a little background on Keno, and then Keno, I'm going to ask you to maybe talk about yourself a little bit too, the fill in the pieces that I miss here. So Keno is a mission-driven entrepreneur with more than 25 years of experience leading innovation at the intersection of education, leadership development, and impact capital. He has held leadership positions at Purpose, Echoing Green, Breakthrough Collaborative, and has taught resilient leadership at Yale University. As founder and CEO of Synapset Consulting and its affiliated arm, Synapset Capital Partners, Keno leads cross-sector strategy and ecosystem development to advance community-driven solutions. His current work includes launching the Teacher Mental Health Fund and the Synapset Accelerator, designed to invest in and support educator-led innovation. Rooted in equity and systems change, Keno brings a strategic, relational, and future-facing approach to building solutions with, not just for, those closest to the challenge. So that is quite a background there, Keno, and a lot of experience baked into those, few bullet points that I read. Anything come to mind that you want to add to that, and how you got to where you are today? And as you're heading in, I'll say hi to Ashley, who just joined us as well. Hello,
Hello, Ashley and Rachel. It's like
and
people are
Rachel.
coming in now. Um, I think one thing that crossed my mind during the introductions is to name my North Carolina roots. So my mother's from Henderson, my father's from Gastonia, and I lived in Greensboro. So it's just good to see so many North Carolinians on the call. Um, and what was the other question you asked me, Kyle? How did I get here? What?
Yeah, I mean that's there's a lot of stuff in that brief bio there. So just any connected tissue, anything that doesn't maybe come through in the bio that you wanted to share for folks to know about you and how you got to where you are, and how how you come in front of us today.
Uh, so from Greensboro, North Carolina, I I guess other chapters include after I graduated from high school, I went to the military and with the full intention of staying in for a while. Was really good at it. Was going nuclear engineering, and um, actually, let me back up. I'm sorry. So I'm calling out in New York. I forgot to name where I'm calling from. And I've done a loop. So I was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, raised in Brooklyn, then went to Greensboro, North Carolina for high school. And let me pause there and let people like do that calculation. And I went to a private school in Greensboro, North Carolina. I was one of four students of color in my school at the time. Uh, Excuse my language, but I want to tell a story about my first day where upper classmen greeted me by saying, "Hey, you here to play nigger ball?" And that was my introduction to the South. That was my introduction to independent schools. Now, I need to say I had many more positive than negative experiences. And thank God I had teachers who were absolutely amazing. But no one really understood the struggle I had fitting into that school because of where I came from. and I also began to struggle where I came from because of where I was going to school. So I, was trying to develop two identities at an age where it's hard just to develop one. So I graduated from there and went into the military with the need to just release a lot of energy and also just like focus my energy on something different. And as I said, I was really good at it going nuclear engineering, and I was originally going enlisted, but scored high on the military version of the SATs and ended up being offered to go to the officer path. So I went to Atlanta, Georgia for degrees in math and physics at Morehouse College. I don't eat pork, not for religious reasons. I just have a hard time digesting it. And one day Morehouse was celebrating pork chops, pork and beans, pork rinds. And as I was leaving the cafeteria to try to find something to eat, a student that I was tutoring in the math lab thought I should come to this meeting on teaching, and because he thought I was a good tutor. Told him I wasn't interested in that, nuclear engineering, going to be submariner. He said they were serving pizza. I was hungry, so I went to the meeting just to get the pizza. Thankfully, the presenter saved the food to the end, and the presentation was on this program starting in Miami that had high school and, excuse me, college students teaching middle school students, and I was intrigued. So I ended up going down there and helping start that program. Now, by then, I've been through Navy boot camp, I've been through Marine Corps boot camp, I've been in hostile situations. Teaching in that program was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. I was hooked, found my calling, knew what I wanted to do. Came back to Morehouse the next year, started my own program called LEAD, Leadership Enhancing Academics and Discipline, which worked with kids getting out of juvenile detention center. Um, and that was my college life. So during the summer, starting these summer programs, during the school year, running my program, and also doing my classes. Junior year, a one of my first students in my program was leaving one day with one of his friends from the neighborhood. We believed the shooter was aiming at someone else, but the bullet hit my kid and he literally died in front of me. I could not save his life. And that's why I decided to dedicate my life to doing whatever I could to prevent that from happening again. And so I declined my commission in the military and started the Breakthrough Atlanta program, which is what I ran for about 10 years. Um, and that program, that experience changed my life. I got into it all in, had never done any of that before, never raised funds, never worked with the board, like all the things that all of you are doing, and burned out after about 10 years. And decided to take a break by going to grad school and still held on to the things that I hadn't quite accomplished with my original program. So launched another program called the Teacher of Color Preparatory Institute, which focused on bringing teachers and administrators of color into our schools. Did that for a while. We got up to 100 schools, all in, burned out again. This time, family and friends were like, really take a break. And so I took a break, ended up becoming the vice president of programs at Echo and Green, as your name, Kyle, and did that for about 4 or 5 years, helping early stage entrepreneurs launch their initiatives, taking the lessons I learned from Breakthrough and TCPI. Um, and then from there, went to Purpose, which is a social impact agency that uses creative storytelling and campaigns to mobilize people to remake the world, which is how I got introduced to Robert Wood Johnson Foundation through our work with the Voices campaign, which was an incubator that Purpose launched that worked with organizations committed to elevating the voices of those most impacted by poverty. And that's what got me introduced to the Impact Hub. Uh, and that was at a time, and Kyle, I'll be honest, this is a small group, so we get to be honest with each other.
Yeah,
When we first got
absolutely.
introduced to Impact Hub, we were cautious and we got into this very carefully. We realized in order for this to work, it was going to take a lot of time, take capacity, and we wanted to make sure that it was something that we were really able to do. This was at a time when Purpose was about 10 years old, so it was still young, but growing rapidly, had grown to 5 offices around the world, over 200 staff, and still transitioning from that startup energy to like a global organization that really needed to cultivate intentionally its culture. Um, but we also knew that it was the right time. We needed to make sure that we were being intentional around launching our culture globally within offices that could have its own control without it being centrally focused. Um, and making sure that we lay the groundwork for purpose to be successful over the next 10 years. So that's a lot of things. That's my history. That's my introduction to this work, and that's my introduction to Robert Johnson and the Hub. So there you go.
Man, thank you. It's a lot packed into a few minutes there, and it's a lot of experience at not a lot of years and practice over. I mean, that's just man. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think I definitely didn't know all of that about you and our time together. So I appreciate you sharing that here and for this discussion. You mentioned a lot about the intentionality that the purpose team entered working with the hub with, and I definitely saw that, and I think the rest of our team saw that in all of our interactions. And I'm wondering how that translated to impact in the work that you all
Mm.
did.
Mhm.
Or were there specific moments where going on this intentional equity journey at Purpose that shifted kind of how you were coming into the work, or was it partners, or just interested in how that intention translated to impact over the year, 18 months is time that we all worked together when we were kind of watching that journey.
Yeah, so like I said, it was 10 years old. So we're at that critical inflection point where an organization was losing the baby fresh smell and trying to, it's double digits. If those of you have kids, it's a big time. Um, and so we entered this focusing on three things that were timely for us at the time. First, helping you helped us create a global EDI framework. We wanted equity, as I said, to be embedded in each office and not centrally located. And so we had an HR office. So we shifted from an HR office compliance nature to a cultural and experience team that ultimately laid the groundwork for what we hope to become the Purpose EDI Council, and more on that later. The second thing, improving hiring and the employee experience. So, and revamping the performance management system, increasing transparency around pay, embedding EDI aligned competencies into all of our every level of the organization. And then the third one was um, and I forget what you called it, but there was a curriculum that you all were guiding us through. And
Yeah.
so we pulled a lot of that into what we were trying to develop a time of learning development curriculum for our team. And one of the things I really appreciated about your curriculum was that you grounded it in common language that we were able to use to establish common language for us around the EDI principles. And then we use that for global onboarding for all of our teams, and facilitating local trainings that were locally sourced trainings for our teams around bullying, around um, psychological safety, about microaggression. So those are some of the specific things that you all helped us work on. I think that was a two-part question. What was the other part?
I think it was about just any specific points of impact that came out of the work, and I think you hit it there. I think one of the things that I appreciated about working with Purpose and with your team was really expanding the EDI framework to an international scale and understanding the complexities of doing so in environments with completely different contexts. Right, there are some similarities, but there is no like shared history between. Um, the multiple offices that you were trying to roll this out to, and the complexity of figuring out how to translate a lot of the concepts into not only other languages but other cultural contexts with religious history and other environments where folks are bringing in their lived experiences, and we're trying to figure out how to frame this in the most open and intentional way possible. I think I appreciated the call out of the what we had at the time, and I think still do, call the health equity curriculum, and the way to kind of move that forward. But starting with common language is one of those things that I think we've seen over time. Folks kind of roll their eyes when you start a conversation. Say we don't need to make sure we're sharing the right definitions, right, and make sure we're talking about this from the same way. But what we've seen in years of practice is if you don't start with that and you don't start with a really intentional focus, it's hard to build that backwards, right? If you start getting into action and there is misalignment on what we mean when we say equity or what we mean when we say privilege, and folks don't have that grounding and understanding, you can't fall back on it. It's like just learning the rules of the road and making sure there's group alignment and agreement. And I appreciated that you all undertook a lot of work to do that on an international scale. I think that was um, my first time working on an international scale doing equity work, which I'm sure came through in a lot of the conversations that we had. But watching you all put that into practice um, was really an impactful
Hmm.
moment for me, and I think a lot of our TA team over time. So just kudos to you all on how you put that out and made it work.
Yeah, can I say one thing? So, in addition to
Please.
the common language, one other thing that we did was try to translate or spend a lot of time translating that language to observable behaviors, which was a wonderful conversation. So even the word trust, for example, trust in an observable behavior shows up differently in Brazil versus UK versus Kenya. Like it just shows up differently. And so when people were showing trust, if they didn't have the common language plus the observable behaviors of what people would see when you are showing trust, um, then that also produced confusion and challenges. So
Mhm.
we always mapped the values to observable behaviors, and that helped us out a lot.
That's really, I'm writing that down as we're talking about it because I think that is a nice addition to the framing because even not even in a US focused
Yeah.
conversation, that is still something that you need to add into that conversation and into the kind of shared agreement space because it does matter how folks show up and how you observe that.
Yeah.
Um, so thinking about moving that work forward and not just at Purpose, but in at Synapse Consulting and the work that you're doing today, how do you see the EDI journey showing up? How do you see what you've learned over the last years and decades of career showing up in how you're working today, what you're doing these days?
Yeah, I think one of the key takeaways for me, both while I was at Purpose and with the work with Synapsid, was the importance and power of curating a culture of feedback first.
Mhm.
Um, One of the things that we often talk about when we talk about equity, we talk about the structures, we talk about the programs, we talk about the frameworks. Um, but feedback loops make it all real. Um, it also maps to psychological safety, which I know is something else that everyone else is focused on as well. When people feel safe giving honest feedback across cultures, across power dynamics, across all of those, then you suddenly have access to truth. And it's that truth that you weren't getting before without that pure culture of feedback.
Mhm.
And the inverse is also true. So with the lack of that, then you are not having the psychological safety, and then you're not getting the feedback, you're not getting the truth. And so whatever you build, any kind of EDI strategies, whatever you build, is sitting on top of fear and silence. So cultural feedback is something that was one of my key takeaways and something that is embedded in the work that we're doing now. Actually, I didn't talk about the work I'm doing now. So Synapse, the play on the word synapse, like the connection in the brain where changes happens, with the T at the end to make sure that's always tangible. So when people think of that synapse, you think of that web, that mapping, right? That those connections. And so what we do at Synapse is invest in teams that are trying to solve problems that they've been impacted by. So you mentioned educators. And so one of the things that we're launching is a fund to invest in educator-led teams to address teacher mental health. In the US, the number one most impacted profession of all professions by mental health are teachers. More than veterans, again, I'm a veteran, more than veterans, more than healthcare workers is teachers. So we're investing in educator-led teams to address teacher mental health. We're also going to be supporting veterans who are getting out of the military or supporting returning citizens impacted by, to address recidivism. Um, and what we are doing differently, though, is by leading this effort in helping the teams develop those team dynamics. And the feedback portion is one of the first things that we lead with when we're helping these teams form. This way, they can get alignment, get clarity, have easier decision-making models, and collectively build towards what they're trying to build together, but with feedback in place. Um, so, yeah, feedback is key.
Have you do you have any tips for folks that are here today on how to establish a good feedback loop? Anything that's worked really well for you? And I will say, while asking that question, that that is really a unique and individual thing. Some things work for some folks and don't for others, and I think it's got to kind of be baked in you as a professional and you as a human. But what works for you?
I think you started right. Each one is different. But for us, the kiss simple, keep it simple. You know, also always starting with clarity, not complexity. You don't need a 40. I'm the kind of person who will always start with like writing a 100-page document just to get all the thoughts down and then share that with everyone. I think I'm done, right? You got it. But that just doesn't work. So starting with the clarity and having that one thing or very that you can focus on, have easy success, have everyone engaged, and get those early wins is one of the first things that we're encouraging our teams to do. Another approach that we do is we map everyone with their leadership archetypes and styles. We believe every team has four archetypes: the visionary, the operator, the connector, and the visionary, operator, connector. Oh my God.
Because we asked you for it. If we
Yeah,
hadn't asked,
exactly.
you'd have
Oh, an
it.
architect. Um, in if they don't have those physically, we help them find other ways to bring those to the team. So if you start with those archetypes and the leadership styles, those collectively go towards the team dynamics. Also understanding the tensions between those styles. So the visionary
Mhm.
is one who will run towards risk and is okay with, just starting and taking imperfect steps, where you might have the operator who needs the budget, the plan, the strategy all in place before they get going. That's a tension. So naming that and being able to help people have those difficult conversations and recognizing which phase the organization is in, which would dictate which archetype should be having the greatest voice, is all part of what we're doing within Synapse.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll also just say again for those of you here, if you have questions for Keno or you want to dig deeper in any of this, feel free to throw them in the chat. You can come off mute and ask. You're not going to throw either of us off. I've seen Keno get interrupted many times and be able to pick up his thread um, right where he was without missing a beat. So I'm comfortable saying you're not going to throw him off either. Um, but in keeping the conversation going, what you and throughout your career, you've been involved in operationalizing equity and putting it in place in organizations that you're in and building it from the beginning and going in and helping organizations put an equity lens in place. What surprises you most about the operationalizing of equity, using an equity lens in day-to-day actions in an organization?
I think, as I said before, when we think about even the way you phrased it, operationalizing equity, we immediately run to the policies, the frameworks, the accountability
Yeah.
structures, and those matter. Please don't get me wrong; those absolutely matter. Um, but as I said before, the real turning point, at least for me, happened when began to acknowledge the human side of this, the fear people have of getting it wrong. Earlier, we talked about the challenges that we're all facing just even saying the word equity out loud these days. The discomfort of surfacing power dynamics and naming them, the fatigue that comes from this change. I'm sure everyone on this call has been wrestling with this and fighting for this for a long time, and there's a fatigue. And there's also vulnerability that's required to be honest about where the organization is falling short. So the technical work is important. Again, please don't get me wrong, but the emotional work is what makes the technical work possible to me. So once I understood that and really understood it, then I found myself changing my approach, becoming more patient, leading more with curiosity, being a lot more intentional with the pacing, with the communication, with the care. Um, those are some of the things that I learned. So operationalizing is important. Again, please don't get me wrong, but not forgetting the human factor behind it.
Yeah. I think that's a really important call out, and knowing that it necessarily elongates processes. It necessarily elongates the time that it takes to operationalize equity and the usage of that in an organization. I think we've observed a lot of organizations jump in and they want a checklist and they want to check all the boxes on the checklist and they want to be done, right?
Mm,
Because we did it, we said we were going to do it, we made a plan and it's done. Now we should be off and down the road. And it often takes folks a long time to figure that component out, that human connection, the giving people different places to plug in based on what they're bringing into the conversation, the fear, the anxiety, the excitement, even the all of the things that folks bring into these discussions about putting equity in place. It takes time, and it takes um, willingness, and it takes the ability to go over some of those bumps in the road that are created for the vulnerability and the authenticity that comes into those conversations.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly right.
And
Um,
actually, you just remind me of another one, the psychological safety of those who are leading it too. For me personally, uh, even though I was a senior leader at Purpose, the president was the one who 100% stood behind this, advocated for it. I think she was even part of, again, I don't remember what you all called it, but there's like a CEO section of
yeah,
the hub. So she was
yeah.
part of that as well, which I also thought was helpful for me to have her be part of those conversations with other CEOs to help, with I don't know what y'all talked about, but she was she was actively involved with that as well. So having wherever the head goes, the body follows, and
Yeah.
having someone who was willing to vocally name that this was a critical component of our success, not only with her, position, but also allocating resources towards it was key as well.
Yeah, I appreciated the way she showed up to those discussions and the way that all of we call it kind of a CEO, executive director. It's almost like a circle, right? We ask folks to come in. It's a safe space where folks can come in and talk about the challenges that their organizations that are going through the deep dive work, because it often surfaces problems that you may not have encountered before, especially if this is, kind of an earlier equity journey for an organization or for a leader. But the ability to come to other folks who have the responsibility of shepherding an organization forward. There's a lot that goes into that you don't necessarily think about if you don't do it, and you can only really learn by doing it. But having the opportunity to have colleagues that are doing it as well, that you can ask questions to, or that you can share that moment of oh crap with, and just need a release valve to talk about it, because you can't talk about it to a lot of people on your team, but you just need to get it out with folks who understand. So that's something that we found pretty valuable in the deep dive work, is having senior and executive leaders be able to have folks to turn to and ask questions to. And one of those pieces of advice I think that comes out of, even if you're doing this without being a part of the deep dive, or you're doing this, kind of on your own, knowing that going in and being able to build a plan of who you're going to call and who you're going to talk to when you hit those bumps in the road is a really important thing to map into the journey.
Can I name
Um,
I'm just now
yeah,
remembering other things. This was a long time
go
ago
for it.
now. This is like 2019,
It has been a
2018.
while.
Um, Again, we had five offices. One was in Brazil. The Brazil team, a good number of the Brazil team members strictly spoke Portuguese. And I found it extremely helpful that the hub was willing to translate your key documents, the surveys, everything into Portuguese for the team, which was allowing them to, provide, number one, hear the questions in their language and then provide answers as well. So I just wanted to name that too as a maybe something that was unique for us, but it was a huge help for us as well.
Yeah, that's great. I'm not sure that we've been asked to do that in other settings, but I definitely think we would if we needed to. So that's good. Rachel, I see your question here. If leadership isn't totally on board with integrating equity into the organization, but is sort of going through the motions to get it done, how do you approach them to get more buy-in? Ooh, that is a whole 3-hour call in and of itself. I mean, Keno, I don't know if you have initial thoughts on it. Anything?
I mean, yeah, this is a major question that comes up. And
Yeah,
I'd love to put out to the whole group, but again, speaking of one thing that helped us, having our CEO be part of the other CEO conversation so that CEO, they could, she could hear it. I mean, she was always on board, but I would imagine a CEO who may not have been as on board, just being those conversations and hearing from other CEOs how important this is and how their organization is actually being more successful because of it, um, was a huge help. But
yeah.
actually, this might be a good chance to open it up to others on the call to see if you have ideas or experiences with this too.
Feel free to just come off mute and weigh in if you'd like.
I can jump in and say, at least from the perspective of helping people, kind of coaching through this, as in transparency, I'm a part of the hub team that help with the coaching. One of the things that has been we've heard has been useful is figuring out how to connect um, the equity work to the bottom line of
Yeah.
the organization. So making it data driven, how does it help to achieve the mission or the organization or accomplish some goals? So I've heard that has been useful. And then we were doing a training or a coaching around this topic with some folks that work around equity and public health. And one of the people said the way that she got buy-in from a legislator in her district was, which is kind of like a leader, was everything that they did, she made that legislator look good. Like as long as he looked good, and it looked like he was winning and providing services within that community, then he was all for it. And this was someone who was not particularly bought into equity. And so the way that she approached things was, we are going to do the work for the people in the most need in these zip codes. It so happened to be the exact same groups that they needed, but the way that it was positioned was by zip code. And then all of a sudden it was acceptable. So I think data driven, tying it into the bottom line, the mission. A lot of times I think the mistake that we make when we're trying to push equity is because it's like we push it from the perspective of morality, or it's the right thing to do.
Mhm.
And if the last couple of years has taught us nothing else, it's taught us that people don't often care about doing the right thing. And as much as we want to appeal to people's sense of the right thing, we might have to take a different approach if we want to get the things done that we want to get done. So it's not that it won't happen. We just might have to use some different language. So I don't know, that might be more, more of what you've already said, but that's the how do that's what I've got.
Yeah, I mean, one
Thanks.
thing that is, again, going back to those four leadership archetypes, because the question was the leadership team as well, which also comes up, looking at how to tell the importance of equity through those different archetypes. So what would a visionary need to hear? What would an operator need to hear? What would an architect need to hear? What would a connector need to hear? And make sure that you're communicating it through those lenses, not just our own, not just our default, which is it's just the right thing to do. So just do it, right?
I think one thing I would add too is, if you have the opportunity and you have the relationship, or if you know someone who does have the relationship, trying to figure out what the resistance is, because you
Mm,
can't really address it fully until you know what it is. And it could be fear, it could be opportunity cost, it could be
yeah.
any myriad thing, right? But once you can, if you can help isolate what the fear is and address your answer to that and help build that into the value case that you're building to advance equity in the organization, that can go a long way. And just a shameless plug, we have TA hours available. So if you want to have a one-on-one conversation, we have a bunch of us floating around. If somebody doesn't shortly, I will drop the email address that you can just shoot a note to and say you want to talk about that. And Rachel, we'd love to sit with you and have a conversation about your specific situation and help figure out the right questions to ask and how to unpack it. Thanks for asking that question. It's been. Any others want to address Rachel's question before we keep, yeah, Arcella, jump in.
I would add that it takes a level of commitment from our top leader that says, yes, this is an issue, and it takes a level of humility to admit that it is an issue, right? And then really put it in motion, what is needed to get to a place of buy-in. And in our case, it was a lot of surveys from the staff, so data, we're data heavy, so data that said, hey, there's an issue here, or we notice these things, and then having our top leader go to the leadership team and say, hey, y'all, listen to the people. And we need to do something because they're telling us there's an issue here and there. What are we going to do about it? And so it takes a level of commitment plus humility to know that to accept that there's something that needs to be done, and then data to back it up in order for action to take place. And I think that's how we got started with race equity and inclusion work at Lyft, is understanding first that the leader needs to accept that there's a problem and then being backed up by data. And as a result, it's been quite a few years now where we have focused everything around race equity and making decisions. And anybody that comes on board as part of the leadership team needs to understand that we center race equity in all decisions. And so they need to know that coming on board, that's what we mean. So developing a culture of it means that people need to accept the culture of race equity in our work.
And going back to what we were talking about before, translating these concepts to observable behaviors. So when we're saying how does an organization show this, being very specific for your organization, is it a policy shift? Is it a process change? Is it like whatever the thing is, and keeping it simple, like naming one thing that you're going to focus on, making it visible, measuring it as people have talked about, celebrating those small wins, and then that momentum will help, the ripple effect kicks in from there.
I think the other thing that I heard in your moment there, Keno, is committing it to paper, like writing down what the plan is so that you can measure it, so that you can put goals around it, so that you can figure out if it's actually being moved in any forward direction, right? I think I am guilty of this on a daily basis, and I imagine a lot of people are. I have a lot of goals, and only like 5% of them get written down, but those are the ones that I actually make progress on because I wrote it down somewhere and I have shared it with other people, right? And like that's when you actually start to see traction and movement. Um, but the observable behavior, I like that. I'm gonna have to add that into my lexicon. That's why I appreciate Keno jumping in to talk about things. I always walk away with a few notes that make me a better equity practitioner on a daily basis. Um, so, Keno, you shared a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom in our discussion so far, but I just wanted to leave it open if you have any other advice that you would give to the folks on this call, the folks that will watch the video clips of this later. Anything that you haven't shared yet that you think is really important for being a leader of equity work and helping to put equity principles in place wherever you are.
I think we named quite a few good ones. So clarity, not complexity, just keeping it simple. I do want to rename the power of the culture of feedback shift, making it a cultural practice, not a performance management tool. Um, as we just talked about, building for the long run by starting with something small and making it visible, measuring it. I think you said celebrating the wins and then building momentum. And I guess one more thing that we might have been implying, but just to be explicit about it, is don't do it alone. This is
Absolutely.
hard work. So make sure that you are in community, both internally with the team members, as well as your community outside of the organization as well, because this is hard, everlasting work. So make sure you're not doing it alone.
Excellent. Any other thoughts or questions for Keno specifically, or for anybody else on the call here that folks want to ask?
Actually, can I just say a plus one on that? So again, name is something that might be obvious. I last participated in the Hub 2019, I think. And now it's 2025, and I'm still connected to this community. So the Hub is one of those communities that gets it. It's a community of folks who are not only living in and breathing it themselves, they have extraordinary expertise, but they also see what other organizations are doing. So they're an incredible resource for some solutions that they've seen in other organizations that you might be able to tap into as well. So definitely take advantage of those office hours. Continue coming to these sessions with um, what's this called? The speakers, not the speaker, the what is this?
This is the
The
Grantee
Grantee
Spotlight.
Spotlight, yes.
Yes.
And connect with other people on this call. It's an extraordinary group of people who get it as well. And it's a rare chance, especially for those of us who are doing this work. We oftentimes live in isolation or feels like we're in isolation doing this alone, and just being able to connect with someone else again who gets it. that you can connect with. That definitely encourage you to do that as well.
It's excellent. Yeah, thank you, Keno. Please do keep reaching out to us. Come and join any of the areas where you want to have conversations and talk about it. You can reach out directly, and we can keep conversations going. Um, we'll pause again for a last couple of minute questions, and otherwise, I think this has been a very fruitful discussion. So just a thank you to everyone for joining and sharing your thoughts and questions. And Keno, thanks for your expertise and your just wisdom and all of the conversations when we get the chance to connect. All right. Well, with that, I think maybe we can call it a good day. Almost an hour. Quite a lengthy conversation on equity principles and operationalizing it. So thanks again, everybody, for showing up. Keno, you're just an invaluable source of knowledge and wisdom. So thanks so much for showing up and sharing your inspirational and practical ideas on how you put this stuff into motion, um, and keep equity moving every day. Oh, and Tiffany just dropped the survey, the evaluation link for this discussion in the chat. So if you wouldn't mind filling that out, we would appreciate it. We'll probably follow up with an email with it shortly as well. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.